AI is transforming applications, but with innovation comes new risks. Enter Noma, the first application security platform built to secure the entire data and AI lifecycle. From your AI supply chain to models and runtime, Noma protects it all. With a single platform that integrates seamlessly across your data pipelines, Jupyter Notebooks, ML Ops tools, code, and application SDKs, Noma delivers full lifecycle visibility, security, and compliance. Start securing your data and AI lifecycle at securityweekly.com/Noma. Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. We just talked about the 2024 AppSec Year in Review. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm still here with John Kinsella. Hello, John, and we've got some news. So I did tease some LLM and AI stuff, but I'm going to hold off on that for a second because first, something near and dear to my heart. I came across an article with a new path traversal payload. This is pretty amazing. It is where there's smoke, there's fire. And this is a vulnerability that, who found this? Watchtower, I believe. Watchtower Labs found this. And what was really neat is that it is // does wonderful shenanigans against Java with the Spring framework. And so it was really cool. Once again, it's this type of article that's really well written, very fun to follow. It's good and educational just for learning that attacker mindset, if you will, or what does it take to have the patience and creative thinking to hack a target. I also appreciated that it isn't just we're the smartest people and thought about this out of thin air. It does give some acknowledge and shout out to Orange Sai, who talked about a lot of different types of path traversal and path-based problems back in most recently in a Black Hat presentation. And what was really neat, or I say most recently, this was from 2018, but it does tie into that theme of parsing and parsing paths that I like to generalize on. So this is how I turn something about my favorite path traversal into more general discussion of parsing. And one of Orange Sai's comments in the presentation was, and don't use Microsoft because the paths and the path normalization can get really complex and it's going to look a lot different from Unix or Linux-based paths as well. So if you're trying to do something to normalize a path and then do your security checks on it, you have to make sure you understand Microsoft's UNC. You have to figure out, are there forward slashes, backslashes, dots in there, all types of fun things. So parsing, once again, is can be a memory safety issue, but you can still have lots of fun vulns in memory safe types of parsing. So that's my starting soapbox for today. That's what got me excited, John.
Okay, well I'll see and raise because I snuck one in here sort of because I didn't realize that one was a path traversal, but I had another one that so it's a double J for you actually. So one of the ones I snuck in here at the end, CVE 2024-10-905. is a path traversal of a CVSS 10 in Identity IQ. So we don't have too many details out on this yet, but what is known is as a path traversal, you have the ability to, I believe, access any file in the system running the software. So Merry Christmas is coming early for you, Mike, but you got two of them today.
That is awesome. And I'm just going to put this out there. The path traversal was on one of the first or second versions, the OWASP top 10, and then disappeared. So that's why I make fun of the OWASP top 10, just because I'm spiteful and bitter.
I did mean to quiz you also. This is, I know you're not the biggest fan of CWE, but this is CWE 66. So for future reference.
CWE 22, path traversal. But John, let's have some more fun. So let's see how excited we can get about this. It's LLM time. Now, I've got a couple articles, but the first one I'm going to pull here is actually just a link to report number 2871792. Try and remember that one out of HackerOne. But the reason I'm pulling this out is that it was supposedly a buffer overflow vuln in str copy. So here's a string copy that curl, shame on them, was misusing. But as it turns out, and as Daniel Stenberg was writing up, this was basically just as a junk security report in his phrasing. This was LLM generated that looked well written, looked convincing, but didn't look like a vulnerability at all. And as things turned out, was not a vulnerability at all. And this is from, what is this? Only 9 days ago, as we're recording this right now, so the very beginning of December. But if you go back to January of this year, the Curl blog, Daniel's blog, was talking about a fun, the I in LLM stands for intelligence. And yes, that's much like the S in something stands for security. S in IoT, that's what it is. Depending on how you spell IoT. Some people spell it with an SH. But anyway, I digress. The point of his article, his blog post here, was that everyone wants to use LLMs to find vulns, and it's not being very successful, at least within the bug bounty space. Now, there's precedent for this, to be a little bit fair, in that a lot of people were just running scanners. And submitting scanner junk into bug bounties and saying, "Hey, you have TLS, SSL v2 enabled," or some other junk like that. But it was fortunately very obvious to say this actually has the word crawless in it, or Rapid7. This is formatted like it's straight out of the tool. You can just easily close it, move on. The LLMs sadly look a lot more convincing. And now you're taking a lot of time out of the triagers, out of the HackerOne team, out of the Daniels team. And that is the type of time sink we don't want to see at all. So, not a great look for LLMs so far at the point.
Yeah, and that really is the biggest thing for me is I think it's 4 people's time they took up on this, 3 or 4. Even if it's just a few minutes to say, kiss off. That's, this is one of the ones where folks should go and click on this and read, because the description is, I don't know, 200 words. I'm just randomly guessing. It's a pretty decent length. Just to actually read that and take it in and actually think about what's going on, that's probably going to take you a few minutes at least. So you're seriously wasting people's time with this type of thing, and that's really unfortunate. And I don't know if this was done maliciously. Probably not. This is probably innocent, but still, it's you are wasting someone's time. I don't know. It's interesting, because one of the things I don't know about you, Mike, but I'll tell new people who are trying to get into security, go out to the bug bounties and find something and go and hack on it and see what we can do. But if this is a result, we need to figure out how do we. And maybe it's okay to let people use tools like this, but still, how does either H1 or the end community figure out how to sort of filter this stuff out?
Yeah, and Daniel even points out in his blog that there's a large population of bug bounty researchers out there that are not native English speakers. So lots of times they'll use a video and just demonstrate in the video, here's what the vuln looks like, here's how it's exploited. That's really helpful. A picture, especially a streaming picture, speaks much more than 1,000 words. There's no problem using an LLM to fix up your writing to make it sound more natural. The point here is you can't just trust the LLM to say, here's a vuln, and you don't vet it yourself. Yeah. And I included another link. So this is not just curl that's falling victim to this. I included a link to another blog post, a new era of slop security reports for open source, from Seth Larson, talking about this from the Python land. And makes the same point about seeing scanning tools doing this, but now it's doing LLMs as well. So I'm curious. I want to stay on this one for a tiny second longer. I'm just looking. Looks like this is the only issue this user has submitted. Oh, wait, is it? Let's double check that. But where I want to go is, if you're thinking punitively, does this person get banned from HackerOne? It's easy enough to create another account, but do you ban them? Do you put them do you downvote them? How do you, because this is if it's just one, it's not that bad. But if they've been spraying this across a bunch of different open source, okay, now it's really getting serious. But if it's a new person who doesn't know when they're learning, I don't want to just completely block them off. So how do you, what type of handholding do you do there around something like this? That's another aspect of this to think about. How do you what's educate or help or improve? Yeah, and that type of constructive feedback, I think, is an underlying theme of, to generalize what we do, about the modern, what a modern relationship between AppSec and developers should be. I think my only follow-up comment there too is that also does still take time. But maybe it takes time to mentor them, help them. But perhaps there's something that comes out of, like the OWASP Security Champions Guidebook, that could help here. At least a sense of how to model that, how to develop that. Because I do want to, and I bring that up as a throwback to our first segment where we're talking about the year in review. Let's stick on LLMs for a second, because perhaps there is that aspect of learning. So just, how much can you trust LLMs? How much could you break LLMs as well? And I think, as we also mentioned last segment, everybody had a CTF about prompt injection. I think Wiz came up with some fun ones. They had their airline. I think they had two. The airlines one was really neat. Many others. I think Trail of Bits had one. Some others. But here is now Microsoft joining the fray, if you will, about another CTF project about prompt injection. You've got until January 20th to go through that. So check that out. And then another one, and we'll get your reactions to these, John, is I did find I stepped into the crypto space, but only because a human player outwitted the Freza AI agent in a $47,000 crypto challenge. So, yeah, this was crypto, but it was a CTF-like competition. I'll come back to that in a second. It was basically about how can you trick a generative AI into sending you the money, basically. So it's very much a money-based CTF. And the success was basically the user tricked the LLM into this approved transfer function, which was used originally to just receive money, tricked the LLM into thinking that it's okay to use the approved transfer function to send money. And that's how they got their $47,000. So it was really cool. It was a demonstration, once again, of just being clever, outwitting LLMs, and how difficult it is to have safeguards. Only reason I threw in there that CTF-like is that you had to actually pay to submit a prompt. And anytime there's money involved in the crypto space, I'm like, is this a scam? Is this a rug pull? Who's skimming off the top of this? That's not, CTF's the true spirit. I will say the true spirit of CTF Christmas is that you don't have to pay to play. So one small caveat there, although I did appreciate what the outcome was for that.
Yeah. I actually had a hard time, as we started talking, if people saw the confused look on my face while I was trying to find this article. The hosting website had thrown up a few pop-ups and different things in my browser, and had to go and try and track down where the article was. So apologies in advance. Yeah, it's that is a bit of a red herring when you have to pay to submit. That's hey, maybe that's our new business model for ASW in 25.
I like it. The other, if we're going to lean, so if I did it once, I might as well do it twice. I had the second article. This is my quota for the year, I promise. I did bring a second crypto-related article in here. This was Solana's Web3.js library that was backdoored. So once again, I did pull this in because of a callback to our previous segment. We were talking about the XZUtils backdoor. So backdooring libraries is not unknown, and in this case, profitable. So that's one of the other things. The crypto space is kind of a self-funding bug bounty, if you will, because if you find a vuln, you can get the money. One of the other reasons, as an aside, that I do still pay attention to the crypto space is I do love business logic types of vulnerabilities. These are things that are more bespoke to the actual application itself or how the product works. It's typically not about throwing a bunch of garbage into an endpoint and seeing what errors come back. It's more of that creative thinking of how could I abuse this? And smart contracts are a great example of those failing. So that's my excuse for still paying attention to this area. But coming back to this, it was a supply chain Web3.js. John, I know you've probably got some thoughts here, but let me also prompt your thoughts on how much should we be using JavaScript for, basically wallets with money in them, even if they're crypto money.
I'm trying to think how long that ship has been sailing. I think it's been a while.
It's It's already out there. So we're not
I hear
pulling
you're
it
coming
back.
from. I think it's a little late on that one, but I agree with you. Excuse me. I'm either
I know
coughing
we're
or
talking
yawning
about
today,
crypto.
sorry,
This is
buddy.
I know. We'll get you something else. Don't worry, John.
Just looking at this, it looks like it was only exposed for about 5 hours. So, they caught it pretty quickly, at least, if I'm reading those timestamps right. Yeah. It's we both saw this one. It got a yawn from me, I'll admit. But at the same time, it's as something which is being, Solana's popular. This is being used out there. Probably it'd be interesting to see how many times downloaded. No. Tells you have 350,000 weekly downloads, but do the math, you might find out how many times people got this, installed it. But
Right.
I'm not aware of any huge side effects from it. Probably better to do the 47,000 on the previous LLM one and go from there.
So let's so listeners, do let us know if how much of this crypto space, like vulnerabilities, to be clear, in AppSec, you're interested in, because we could pull in more, but we could also continue, at least me, to mostly ignore it. To say the
And if you have a
loud part out loud.
suggestion, send your suggestion along with zero point 0.1 Bitcoin to.
Well played. Other suggestions. So we did start about talking about vulnerabilities, as I typically do. We were talking about vulnerabilities and prompt injection, but I always try to then back end our conversation on the news about the defensive side, if you will. And I've got two articles about generative AI and LLMs. One is the Oops 5 series GenAI security mistakes to avoid. This comes from the Google Cloud security folks. And there's also the OWASP Top 10 for LLM Applications 2025. Yes, they updated for next year already, just this past November. So, John, I'll let you flip a coin. Let's do some prompting. Which one would you like to talk about first?
Well, what could be fun is we could just pick one of these things and see if you can figure out which one it's from. Excuse me. So, Mike.
Oh, dear. All right. Closing my eyes. Going to try not to cheat.
Let's see. Excessive over-provisioned access. Is that from OWASP or from Google?
That's from Google, because that was one of the two that I liked on the Google list, because I liked how that was expressed. So you made it easy. Keep going.
Let's try one more. Let's see. And we can't look at where I'm looking on the screen. Excessive agency.
Excessive agency. That sounds like the LLM version of the Google Cloud version of the same topic. Excessive over provisioned access.
Exactly right. Sounds sort of similar, don't they?
Okay.
Yeah, you got it right. But our point here is, or my point here is that I had to stop when I was just looking at the Google one, which is, I think it's a good high level article to show your manager's manager. Yeah. But then a little deeper, meatier version would be the OWASP one. I don't know if that's my thoughts, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think, once again, we're of similar minds, so we're going to have to find something, John, that we vehemently disagree about, just to keep the listeners entertained. For me, on the Google list was mistake number 4, neglecting inherited vulnerabilities, which just for me sounds like a very nice encapsulation of supply chain and all of that ilk. Because when the OWASP Top 10 for LLM Applications first came out, I think about half of them were pretty much like, well, we could talk about AI or API or just some application, and half of these topics just points to you're building code. They weren't really specific to an LLM. I think I do appreciate that now the top 10 is a bit more refined. One of the aspects about it, though, is that it's a mix of, are you consuming the LLM? Are you creating an LLM? And then, or are you interacting with an LLM? Those are sort of like the broad, and when I say consuming, are you consuming the output or reacting to the output versus interacting with it? And that's where sort of the the OWASP top 10 has a bit of mix of those, because not everyone needs to worry about data model poisoning if you're just consuming, you're just using ChatGPT. So that's where I'm not sure how well thought through that is. So as I was talking about good communication skills in the last segment, you're gonna have to bail me out on this one, John.
That yeah, I think I get, like I said, the Google version is obviously written for, like, fairly high ups.
Yeah.
But neglecting inherited vulnerabilities. Could you get any more basic in a security document? I mean, come on now.
I guess they could have said, inventory your assets is the other, bit easy one.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think actually the good one on that list, which is probably it's a little hand wavy, but the weak AI governance. I think that's what most people need to be thinking about more, right? Like, not so much like, is it going to kill us, but like, what's sort of the again, back to my thought earlier around, as we do the 6 month later thing, like, what's the KPI around, let's leave the management speak out of it. What are our goals around to see how it does in 6 months? Weak AI governance, or as you start doing an AI program, what do you want it to do or not do? Set those guardrails up initially, right? And then be able to have that to understand as you go forward. Are you closer to making mistakes or not? But hey, we all have to think about this in different ways. So
we do.
Yeah, no. It's interesting because I'm not being super negative on the OWASP one for once, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when you put them side by side with something else, like, that has value for folks. But if I close the Google article and open like the standard OWASP top 10 and start comparing the two, then we'd probably be having a different discussion.
Indeed. And let's have a different discussion now about Rust. So I did pull in launching the 2024 State of Rust survey. So not really much of an article here to discuss. I mostly just wanted to highlight it for our listeners, those of you who are having fun getting rid of all of your C and C++ code and now starting new code with Rust. I don't think even CISA isn't saying rewrite all the C code out there. It's more of their pitches. Start a new project in Rust or memory-safe language, even though I'll just kind of whisper that Java, PHP, there are some memory-safe languages that we've seen a lot of web app vulnerabilities in that have nothing to do with memory safety. But that aside, here's the survey. Go fill it out. But, John, one of the things I wanted to have fun with this is let's not bug them too much. But if we were to propose a keyword for Rust, how they have safe, unsafe, or my mind goes to the keywords or the function name in like React, dangerously set inner HTML. Do you have any keywords that you'd recommend or you wish Rust would start supporting? And what would that keyword do?
Faster.
I like it.
And that sounds sort of very haha funny, but right at the same time, like, as a manager, our Rust code, which we're doing, is very performant, and we spend time tuning and tweaking, and we're not down at the bytecode level yet. But if I could just throw there's certain parts of those code bases where if I could throw like a faster command at it and just like have things work better, that's like as plenty here managers you guys can possibly hear me say. But at the same time, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to throw that on my 6 months later list just to see if the faster keyword pops up in Rust. My thoughts was I'd love to just honestly replace that unsafe keyword with, I'll give you a choice of two, either yay pointers or just doomed, and just bring even more warning into that.
Doomed.
Yeah, let's be doomed. But speaking
Who needs
of
to do
to do. Speaking of doomed, and part of the history, you're doomed to repeat history if you don't learn from it. John, let's end on a really fun article from comes out of Portswigger. Well, I don't want to steal your thunder. Introduce this article for us.
That's quite all right. This is from our friends at Portswigger. So, what they are writing about today, or last week on the 4th. Is in the original version of cookies version 1.0, which, I don't have my notes around, 1997, I think. If I go look at my notes real quick, I had it in here. 1997, hey, I'm right. But in that first version of the cookie spec, which, is long gone and past and we don't use anymore, as we've seen with SSL and some other things, you're able to convince some systems, maybe either a web server or a WAF, to go back and respect the old standard, say, hey, I'm going to use the old standard, which gives us to the point of, is that framework, modern framework, or relatively modern framework, very robust, I will say, at handling the old standard. And that's sort of what they go through with this article. Excuse me, finding out that at one point that you're able to use a combination of white space and escape characters to bypass some of the protections which are built in some of the WAFs out there. The chart which really caught my attention near the top of it, they have they show how does the modern framework parse the version number and then the path and the domain and the cookie, and they show it for Flask, Django, PHP, Ruby, Spring, and Simple Cookie. I have no idea what Simple Cookie is. But it's visually very different, like how they just look and parse one very simple example. And their point, which I'm going to sort of take back to one of the concepts of 2024, is when you see this much sort of complexity and weirdness going across multiple different packages, it's a pretty good sign that there's a chance for some sort of security, either hijinks or a full-blown vulnerability, right? So, and I think that's one of the things we've seen multiple times this year, is as things become more complex in some of these systems, it's a lot harder to sort of count and herd your cats and make sure that everyone's doing the right thing in a secure way. So maybe that's something we'll watch on for 2025 as well.
Yeah, here I'm getting excited about things like the same site cookie, which is one of those things that can help us just get rid of CSRF. It's get rid of an entire class of vulns. But going back to 1997 and just using these is wonderful. And we pointed out in the past too, just what is a HTTP, either a protocol or a spec that is handled differently, parsed differently by whatever the web server is. And you already went through the list of these different frameworks. In the past, we've covered differences between Nginx and Apache Traffic Server and other things that just say, we're going to muck about with headers this way, or when headers come in out of order, we'll reorder them this way, things like that. So this is a wonderful example of just cookies are old, but they're still apparently fun things to discover and find in them that have good security consequences. So great article to highlight. And I think, John, that wraps up the news for this segment. We've only got one more week of news before we're done with the year. But I don't know, anything that we want to be thinking about, or that we want our listeners to be thinking about as we go into our last episode of the year next week?
I think the big one is, there's a few parts to it. One is we sort of wrap up 24, look back as we did, and like, what was your good and bad highlights of the year? Hey, maybe send us a few. We'll talk about them on air if they're things we're willing to share. Or what do we want? How do we want to approach AppSec in 2025? On that Rust survey, Mike, I hope all our listeners do go out and actually take it. One of the first questions they ask is like, do you have experience in Rust? So they're looking for input even from those who are maybe not diehard Rust people. So help the community build a better language for all of us.
Go diehard Rust people, go watch Die Hard this season. I think that's the only other riff I can add to what the words that John is leaving us with. So I will say thank you, John, for setting that up, and thank you for once again walking through the news. I want to say thank you to everyone who's been listening. Please do remember to subscribe, share on the socials, check out the show notes. And speaking of AppSec in 2025, check out A Better Tomorrow by VHS Glitch. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly.